What's up, y'all? Welcome back to another episode of the Owens Recovery Science Podcast. Quick update for y'all, just letting you know where we're going to be in the next few weeks and months. You can catch us in Miami and Austin, both on July 20th. So just shoot over the website and sign up for those courses if you're in those areas and looking to take a BFR course. Then we'll also be in Kenosha, Wisconsin, and San Diego, California, sunny San Diego, on July 27th. So again, shoot over to the website. Just in that top menu bar under courses, you can find our blood flow restriction courses there. And then of course we got stuff coming up in August and September and October. So hunt around, find something that's close to you, and get out to one of those courses if you're interested in learning a bit more about BFR and how to use it, especially in the clinic. Then the bigger news, probably, because we haven't had too many of these just yet, is we've got 3 different ultrasound courses up on our site right now. A 4th one for mid-November is soon to pop up there. That'll be out west. But we've got July 27th and 28th in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. Beautiful Fort Lauderdale, which is right by Miami. If you didn't know, I didn't know, that's why I say it. Then we got Atlanta, Georgia on September 14th and 15th. And Salt Lake City, Utah at the University of Utah on October 19th, 20th. So shoot over to the website. You can sign up and handle everything right there. If you got questions or anything like that, you can email us at info at owensrecoveryscience.com. That's the email, info at owensrecoveryscience.com. And let us know what kind of questions you have. We'll be happy to answer those and make sure that you are getting, what you're hoping to get out of things there. So without further ado, let's kick it over to Johnny and me to interview Sherry. This is the Owens Recovery Science Podcast.
All right, welcome back to another Owens Recovery Science Podcast. Kyle, what's up, man? I've got one of our favorite guests. This is a 2-timer, bro.
I know.
She's a rarefied air. I don't know if we've had that many guests that have been twice. Maybe Luke.
I think Luke. Yeah.
I'm not sure.
Luke. But that might be it. Yeah. So yeah.
It's elite company here.
New status.
Yeah, Kyle, I was on 60 Minutes. I don't know if I've told you twice.
Were you?
And the producer told me that if I made it on a 3rd time, they would give me like a little special 60-minute stopwatch they do for everyone with their 3rd time. So if our guest today makes it on a 3rd time, we need something cool to give her, like 3rd time's a gift.
All right, we can come up with that.
Like a little rabbit's foot. Do they still have rabbit's feet? I don't think you can get those little Lucky Charm rabbit's feet anymore.
Not in California.
Are y'all too young to even know what those are?
I know what that is.
I know what they are.
Yeah.
Okay.
They come in all
you
different
don't see
colors.
them anymore. That would be a good one for this guest. Do you have a lab in school, Sherry, where y'all learn how to properly make a rabbit's foot?
I don't remember that course specifically in my veterinary curriculum.
Can
you imagine? Like that's your first job as a veterinarian, making rabbit's feet.
Top 10 weirdest questions I've been asked on the podcast.
Dude, what in the world?
There's a missing market because you can't find them anymore, apparently. There's no more 3-legged little rabbits hopping around, limping around out there. So anyways, we're going on too long here. So welcome back, Sherry Johnson, the vet, the myth, the legend. So episode 25, we first had Sherry on, and she is a leader in the equine rehab space. She is a veterinarian. She also has her PhD now. Congrats. Whoop, whoop.
Thank you. And, thank you.
What's obviously special to us with this as well is she's very interested in applying blood flow restriction in the equine world, as well as doing research with blood flow restriction in the equine world, which if you listen to our last podcast with her, and I learned from so many orthopedic researchers and surgeons, we learn a whole lot in the orthopedic world from the equine space. And so she's got a new cool paper that's gonna, I think, kind of blow our mind with some things we see with tendon, some things that has never been documented before, blood flow restriction. So Sherry, I'm rambling. Welcome back.
Thank you guys so much for having me and having me again. I feel like VIP here. We're missing Zach's uncle.
Yeah,
We got to
this
give
is
him
good.
a shout out. He's
Yeah,
not here
he's
to
all
defend
right.
barbecue choices. I think we gave him a hard time about that last time, and you, Kimbrel, as well, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, Sherry, I don't know if he shared his barbecue sauce concoction with you, but I'll tell you, it is 3/4 Jack Daniels and then like a dropper or two of molasses and some spices. That's pretty much Zach's barbecue sauce.
Yeah, well, he's not here to defend himself.
So that's the perfect way so we can get on real good.
We're gonna have plenty of Zach jokes. Let's do this.
That's how I like it.
Zach, if you're listening,
Sure.
I will be in Georgia in July, and I did not participate in this hazing. So
we'll get you to say something.
I don't know what has Zach done to get Sherry so on his side, man. Golly,
he was the OG working with her with
he was the OG.
and everything.
He was the OG.
And people love Zach. My wife is always like, God, I love Zach. We didn't get to see him enough either, but he's got some endearing little quality. I think he's got like a little kid brother thing, and it's not just the height issue. I think it's he's got something where he's just so endearing.
Watching Zach work around the horses, and being with the horses those first couple of times when we were experimenting and putting cuffs on and things, like, it was absolute comedy. It was like, tell me you've never been around a horse without telling me, right?
Yeah.
Like, please don't stand there, Zach. You're gonna get pawed in the face.
Stop standing behind the horse while we're getting an LOP.
Yeah, exactly. So poor Zach. But yeah, thank you guys so much for having me today. I was so excited to be on here, and we have a lot to chat about since the last podcast that I was on. So things moving forward for sure.
Nice. Well, so if people haven't listened to episode 25, go back and listen to it. But give us a little bit of your background, Sherry. Where are you from? Where are you at? Where are you going?
Yeah, so I'm from Iowa originally. Did my veterinary training at Iowa State University. And then I did my residency in equine sports medicine and rehab based out of Colorado State University, but it was a collaborative program with a practice called Equine Sports Medicine LLC as well. So I was very much a residency trained hybrid in terms of private practice and academia. And once I got done with my residency, got board certified, also completed my PhD at Colorado State University. And the bulk of my PhD focus was novel strategies related to tendon healing, orthopedic rehab in horses that have translational applications to humans. So certainly the focus of my PhD work was, as you know, blood flow restriction training and trying to bring basically modern technology and modern methodology for use in horses. And what could we learn from horses to then apply to humans? And how could we really move the needle forward in terms of equine recoveries as well? So looking at orthopedic rehab recovery rates and traditional paradigms, what can we push forward using the best science, the most modern science that's out there? So I loved my PhD. I loved my PhD work. It feels like a long time ago now. But that's my background. So now I actually remain affiliate faculty at Colorado State University, but I exist in private practice. So I'm a senior partner in the managing rehab veterinarian at Equine Sports Medicine LLC. And we have rehab centers that I oversee and manage the care of all of those horses, both in Whitesboro, Texas, and in Scottsdale, Arizona now. So super excited that we've been able to launch our second rehab center. Have a great crew out there. Arizona, the state, has been very welcoming in terms of working with those horses. So it's been a journey. We've grown a lot. We've learned a lot. And the footprint in terms of providing really excellent care to more horses is definitely something that we continue to be focused on.
And the rehab piece seems like it's just exploded. Like it's gotten out there. You said
Yeah.
you basically had like maybe 5 horses you were treating, and now you've got almost like 50 at a time.
Yeah, I think, the last time that I was on this podcast, I probably had anywhere from 5 to 8 horses that I was professionally working with. And now I'll have about 50 at any given time that I'm working with. And those athletes, they are why I get out of bed every single day. I really do eat, sleep, and breathe rehab and focusing on their recovery. And I get to work with so many different types of horses, so many different types of owners. And I'm super competitive, right? And I was an athlete myself. And so, you always want to push the bar and get the best results possible and accelerate the recovery. Essentially all the same things that you guys on the human physical therapy side are working with, right? Except, my patients can't necessarily talk back, but they may kick or strike back. But yeah, they're individuals, they're different, they like to be handled differently, they can be quirky, some have good work ethics, some are lazy. It's just all kinds of kinds. So it is truly a wonderful gig. I am very, very blessed in loving what I do so much.
Yeah, and it runs a spectrum. So when we first met and we were discussing potentially doing BFR, my mind went straight to like a racehorse. That's all I could think of. But it's, you're almost more with workhorses, show horses, and things like that.
Yeah.
And it sounds like multi-million-dollar horses to just a workhorse almost.
Yeah, I work with a lot of really expensive, really famous horses that do everything from sprinters to thoroughbred race horses to really, really high-end Arabian show horses, a lot of working Western performance horses, cutters, reiners, cow horses, all around Western show horses. Certainly, I'm most known for my work with Western performance horses, as serving as the official veterinarian for the AQHA for their world shows for the past, however, I've lost track of the years at this point. But the beauty of rehab is that you have to become well versed in all of the sports, right? And you can't just stay in that one singular lane that maybe you have more experience. So, I really have to be familiar with all of their sports, and any horse that comes in and does something different that I'm not familiar with, I do spend a lot of time learning about that sport, because the physiologic load that those tissues and that horse is going to be exposed to when they're ready to go back to work. If I'm not familiar with that and I can't somehow recreate that athletic scenario in a very gradual way, then I'm going to miss the mark big time, and I won't have that athlete prepared to go back very well. So there's tons of discipline specific strategies that we utilize on the rehab floor. And it is highly, highly cerebral, right? We're always thinking about new ways to do things and new approaches to old problems.
Tendons suck to deal with in a human. And so I can only imagine in a horse what you're going to do when you can't just have them trying to eccentrics and increase load, I guess. And so kind of what have you guys done in the past? So like you said, there's probably not a lot of evidence to show anything has really worked, but what's primarily used on a horse with a tendon problem?
So you're exactly right in that tendon injuries suck, right? And that was kind of the reason that my PhD work was focused more on tendons than it was anything else. And I think whether you're a human or whether you're a horse, one of the biggest things that you're working against is the re-injury rates, right? Lesional monitoring continues to be a big struggle for humans and horses, right? Like it looks a certain way on MRI or ultrasound. Does that mean it's physiologically ready to sustain load again? And how can we improve our injury, our re-injury prediction rates, right? And so that really has been a challenge. And I think you guys on the human side struggle as much as we do on the equine side of things. And so the strategies that we're using in these horses, we are using forms of eccentric loading as best we can, right? But the trick of equine rehab is you've got to get a horse to do something, make it seem like it was their idea, and in a very controlled way, and you can't say, hey, stand on your right leg and do a heel drop, but slow it down like 5 seconds in the down phase, right?
Tell me when it stops hurting, I'm going to add weight.
Yeah, and tell me when it hurts, right? And so the role of being a really good horseman in the barn and being able to read our patients and work on that behavior component is key. But we're using a lot of things within the mechanical stimulation realm. So the role of exercise in terms of frequency, intensity, duration remains a key component in terms of rehab. The eccentric loading possibilities that we utilize in terms of backing exercises. I think you guys use walking backwards, right? In some of your tendon injuries as well. Ground pole passes, working in those exercise variables as gradually as possible, but also utilizing and optimizing workload and polarizing that workload. I think as I've aged and I've rehabbed more horses, I've gotten a lot more bold about polarizing my horse's workload. And we've always been so much like 15 minutes twice a day in steady state, and then you're going to increase it by 5 minutes. And I think the more we're learning about tendons, right, is they need some level of confusion in order to remodel, right? Like one day they may need to peak at this certain workload, the next day they need an off day. And so you've got to really target that component of things as well. And I think the most highly evolved athletic training programs are incorporating those variables as well. BFR has also, for me, been a big pillar of physical therapy that I have been reaching for, not only from a BFR walking exercise perspective, but from just a general IPC perspective as well. And for those of you listening who are not horse people and probably wondering what the heck I'm doing on this podcast talking about tendons, horses actually have a very long tendon called the superficial digital flexor tendon. And it originates as a muscle up near the humerus. And it's analogous, we think, to the Achilles tendon in humans, at least. That's kind of the histomorphologically most similar tendon that horses have in terms of biomechanic function and structure to that of the human Achilles. And so this work, this paper that we've recently published in EVJ is definitely provides foundational insight into how healthy tendons, equine tendons specifically, may respond to blood flow restriction training. So it was definitely a baby of my PhD program.
Yeah, I think we're definitely going to jump into it here in a second. So everyone think about that. This is analogous almost to an Achilles tendon, but an Achilles tendon that stretches almost all the way up to your butt or something in a human. I was trying to look at all the pictures. That thing's crazy because then it wraps around some bone at the end. I don't know what that is. It's like almost like a calcaneus,
right? Because it starts as a muscle. It then goes to a musculotendinous junction where it goes basically through a retinaculum and through a tendon sheath. It's called the carpal canal. It then exits a tendon sheath, becomes extrathecal, which is predominantly where we see the majority of this type of injury in horses is within that mid-metacarpal or extrathecal region. It then goes back through another tendon sheath and into the foot, and then branches and ends up on the front of P2, which is a distal phalanx for horses, not the most distal, but the middle one. So it has all these different nuances in terms of its structure, but we really think, particularly at speed, it's part of the critical limb sparing component of locomotion for horses and why they can go so fast. And it's basically meant to attenuate the forces of the forelimb that the bones and the joints experience. So very much a critical limb sparing system.
Limb sparing and energy storing at the same time.
Exactly.
So
it reduces like the energetic cost of locomotion.
Yeah, in your paper, you talk about the superficial digital flexor muscle is a fast fatiguer almost. So the tendon has to actually maybe even take up more stress as that muscle fatigues kind of almost rapidly.
Yeah, the actual composition of that muscle can be a blend of type 1 slow twitch and the type 2, the more fast twitch. And that's kind of an evolving conversation as in terms of equine like muscle fiber typing. We still can't really all agree on what those are, but it's a blend. But we think that there is a component of postural or slow muscle fiber components. And some of our pilot work, and I think I went into this on episode 25, but some of our pilot work was actually looking at the oxidative capacity of the SDF muscle itself. And we were actually able to demonstrate, even in a 10-day, very short time period, that the oxidative capacity was improved by exposure of BFR, which was a kind of jumpstart this whole thing. So we thought, okay, we can use existing human technology. It's physically possible to put it on the horses and it's well tolerated. Okay, let's see what it does to the muscle through a biopsy. And that's really where everything started from there until we got formal funding to move forward with the couple publications that we're going to talk about today. So it's
that's
been
what's cool. I mean, everyone.
You guys have been along the ride for all of it, calling up Johnny and Kyle and Zach and helping me build out the walk protocol and think about certain things. So you guys were really instrumental.
You guys really don't use tourniquets in horses for your surgeries and things. So even that was novel.
We use tourniquets in surgery, but mostly those horses are understanding sedation or general anesthesia. So the concept of like a modified blood pressure cuff system able to deliver, temporary reductions in blood flow was a totally novel concept, not tourniquets necessarily, but yeah. There had been some previous work by a Japanese group that looked at very, very basic type of blood pressure cuffs. But that was back in, 2005 and 2006.
2004, yeah.
So yeah, all of this work, right? It uses the Delphi system, which I very much consider to be the most modern, highest evolution of the species in terms of BFR equipment. And if my horses can't break it, then it's got to be pretty good. So,
well, I guess that takes us into the safety paper. So just kind of going through evolution here of what your point was of that and what you found in that publication.
Yeah, our 2022 EVJ paper was all about documenting safety of BFR, right? So pilot studies showed that we were going to be able to induce oxidative capacity changes locally within the SDF muscle, which was exciting. We still didn't know any of the downstream effects. And we still definitely didn't know if it would alter in a negative way kinematics or kinetics of the horses. So the first rule of thumb, veterinary medicine, is do no harm. So with that safety validation paper, our purposes were twofold, right? One, we wanted to make sure that none of the horses we were causing lameness or we were causing a gait abnormality or significant levels of pain. And similar to the hoops that you guys had to go through on the human side, no evidence of thrombosis, neuropathy, anything weird. Even skin dermatitis is a big deal in horses. So we had to make sure that it was going to be well tolerated and that we weren't going to experience any of those detrimental effects. And that was a group of horses, 4 horses total over a 56-day study period. And we were able to show that daily BFR exposures, so 5 days a week at our interval walking protocol with the cuff inflated, did not induce any kinematic or kinetic gait alterations that would be considered related to pain. So that was great. That was objective number 1. Objective number 2 was to try to figure out what were the limb occlusion pressures in horses. Like we know what a central venous pressure would be in a horse, particularly under general anesthesia, and that's all well documented. But no one has ever considered what would actually be the limb occlusion pressure in a standing unsedated horse within the antebrachium region. And as you guys know, right, like getting your LOP and having targeted customized BFR approaches is imperative to delivering that therapy in a safe and efficacious and comfortable way for patients. So we actually did all of the daily limb occlusion pressures in those horses. We looked at differences left or right. We looked at differences between horses. And we were able to document that about 145 millimeters mercury pressure is going to be the nice pressure region for most horses. So it's likely going to simulate that range of that 50 to 80% occlusion in most horses. So if you're an equine practitioner out there and you're looking to guide your BFR efforts, you don't necessarily have to have a Doppler machine there handy, because it is a pain in the butt to measure it in a standing unsedated horse. You can kind of at least have those ranges to go from. So we documented inherent physiologic variation, right, that exists, and that was expected. But for something to be practical and to be used in the mainstream clinical floor, it's got to be a pretty easy to facilitate and do. So that really was the objective of our 2022 publication, safety and looking at limb occlusion pressures.
Do you guys know, Sherry, like in humans, we see a lot of variation, for example, in terms of like the circumference of a limb, and people's blood pressure. And those two things are really kind of the big variables that matter with regard to limb occlusion pressure. Is there a lot of variance in, like, say, for example, limb circumference or maybe central venous pressures in varieties of horses, or like male to female, that kind of thing? Is that
there is a physiologic variation in a couple different things. So one, the girth of the limb, or the general circumference of the anabrachium, or like where you would apply a forelimb cuff in a horse. And there's also quite a bit of contour differences. So like, for example, thoroughbreds will be very, very conical shaped in their leg, but not bulky on the front, if that makes sense. And then some of our larger quarter horse breeds, especially the stallions that are jacked, right, they're going to have big extensor muscle, like size and contour, that you have to actually set the cuff just a little bit lower because it's really conical shape. So there's a lot of nuances and differences in terms of like the length of the radius, so how long-legged the horse is, what that contour of their extensors are on the front, their flexors on the back, and then just in general their shape. And I did a lot of limb circumference measurements in these study horses that I didn't ever report on, right? But looking at those measurements, we've since developed an equine specific blood flow restriction cuff with Delphi. And that specific cuff was not used in these two publications that we're discussing today. So it's even a better contoured, better fitting cuff for horses now that we have available compared to the publications that we're chatting about today. But that is definitely something that went into building out those cuffs and the specs with Delphi, was just that variation.
So let's jump into the tendon paper. Okay, this tendon is a pain in your butt to rehab. This paper was on healthy tendons, and we're seeing this as almost like an analogous to an Achilles. What was your goal in this paper? And this is kind of, like you said, your baby from your PhD work.
Yeah, this was definitely my baby. And if there's one paper that I have published that I am probably most proud of, it's definitely this one. And our results, or our goals, were really, again, twofold. So we wanted to look at BFR's effects in healthy, uninjured, superficial digital flexor tendons, again, somewhat being analogous to the Achilles in humans. And the reason that this study was so inspiring is, one, because of the re-injury rates and all of the things that we deal with in terms of tendon injury. These were on healthy tendons, so this paper did not dive into injury-specific responses. But we have minimal to no evidence, particularly in horses, of the biomechanical effects of BFR exposure for tendons. And we really had no histomorphologic data for BFR exposure to tendons. So this paper really is the world's first and foremost insight into what at the cellular level is happening to these tendons, or not happening, as a result of BFR exposure. So in this particular paper, we had 8 study horses, and 4 of them were unilateral BFR exposure, and 4 of them were unilateral sham cuff exposure. So basically an uninflated cuff that was on one limb. Everything was randomized in terms of left and right. We had a very homogeneous study population. So we had horses that were all similar age, similar demographic. They were all housed in the same barn in the same environment, fed the same diet, and they all underwent the same exercise exposure, right? So again, controlling for all of those study type variables. And at the end of the 56-day study, we were able to biomechanically test those SDFTs. And we wanted to compare three main things: stiffness, cross-sectional area, and elastic modulus. And we were actually able to document that within the BFR group. So comparing that horse's BFR exposed limb to its not BFR exposed limb, the BFR exposed limb actually demonstrated a significant increase in stiffness, and not in a bad way, but in a good way, an actual ability to withstand a greater load in those tendons. So that was certainly a win. We did not demonstrate significant increases in cross-sectional area or elastic modulus that's similar to some of the work published by Sentner et al. In human Achilles tendons. So I think as we're going along this BFR tendon journey, right, we're just learning that maybe that's not exactly how tendons respond to BFR exposure. It may not be through increases in elastic modulus, but the increases in stiffness within the BFR exposed group were certainly interesting. And also very noteworthy was that we were able to document no detrimental histomorphologic effects of BFR exposure. And I was particularly interested in the levels of neovascularization or gag deposition. Was there any fiber dysregularity or anything that would suggest that BFR exposure would be detrimental for these tendons? And there was no histologic evidence of any of that. And we looked at a whole, the pathologist, right, looked at a whole host of factors, ground substance, all of the things, right? And we weren't able to show any detrimental effects. The other thing that I love about this study is that we took tendon samples from 5 different locations. So starting all the way up
Oh,
at
wow. I didn't read that.
Yeah, all the way up at the musculotendinous junction, and then all the way through to the level of the proximal sesamoid bones. So looking at those segmental exposures, right? The tendon that was closest to the cuff versus the tendon that was physically farthest away from the cuff. And
those images are cool, Sherry. Where
aren't they so cool? I can't take those. It's all my co-authors.
I was kind of curious. It's like obviously you stained the tendon. One's kind of like a pink or a red, and one's a blue. Does that, what would you maybe see there that might tell you, hey, something's funky here. This isn't good?
Well, again, I've got to give a shout out to Kelly Santangelo and Katie Sykes, who are both co-authors on this paper. And Dr. Sykes is actually a co-first author with me on this paper. And they definitely did the heavy lifting in terms of the histomorphologic analysis and a lot of the biomechanics work. So Dr. Santangelo was the pathologist that looked at these slides, and she was blinded. So she didn't know, what was exposed to what. And we utilized the Bonar and the Movin scoring systems, which have been previously published as well. So looking at the tenocytes, looking at ground substance, collagen, vascularity, that's more of the Bonar scale. The Movin scale is more related to the fiber structure, fiber alignment. Did we have any rounding of the nuclei, collagen stainability, gag content? So anything that you would look at in a red flag to be like, that tendon is undergoing, or it doesn't like what you're doing to it, there's something detrimental going on. Those specifically were looked at every single proximal to distal location that we harvested the samples. And then also for the musculotendinous junction itself, there was a different scoring criteria used as well, looking at ground substance, fibrosis, and vascularity. The vascularity was interesting to me, and I think I was really hoping that we were going to move the needle there, but we didn't. These were healthy tendons, right? So we don't know what a diseased tendon would do necessarily in response to BFR exposure yet, but we were able to say that there really was no huge difference that we were able to detect in how we scored them and stained them and all of the things.
The only evidence we have that I know of is that Scotland patella tendinopathy. There's a case series. And I think that these people were recalcitrant patella tendinopathy. And so sometimes you'll get like the like the neovascularization, but it's not necessarily a great thing because it's got new nerve, which means the new nerve is pissy. And in that paper, they actually showed that went down, like the neovascularization went down on patella tendon, and they kind of interpreted that as potentially positive because maybe that would be sort of pain settling. So it's interesting.
Well, every one of the subjects' pain went down too, almost by half. So that was kind of
it was
the
like
key
6
points.
people.
But we're
I
talking,
think.
yeah, it was a decent case series. But we're talking injured versus healthy tendon here. So
right,
yeah. But as you mentioned, I think before we came on, I mean, this is the first BFR paper to look at tendon histologically, like full on samples like that, and didn't see anything that would raise concern, because we know so much about BFR and muscle, but with tendon, we don't know a whole lot.
Yeah, that's just the thing. And then, spoiler alert is our group is hoping to publish results on cartilage and also subchondral bone as well. So that really completes the safety validation, tendon, articular cartilage, and subchondral bone, right? But I think, and the other thing that I really think about, which is a cerebral cool component to BFR and tendons, right, is that spike in growth hormone, right? And we know that like downstream regulating that should and does affect collagen synthesis rates. And so for me, in my mind, I'm like, this biohack thing that we have going on, can we actually utilize this to our advantage? Can we use that spike in growth hormone? Does it hone in on the collagen synthesis that we so desperately need to augment healing within these damaged tendons? So that's another whole area that we definitely have way more work to do. But that is a very interesting concept to me when I think about BFR and tendons and all the things.
Was it across the board that all 4 of these forces stiffness increased?
It was based on first and last biomechanical cycles, and it was found to a statistically significant level. So looking at all of those different cycles, right, we were able to document that not only was a trend, but it was statistically significant. We trended towards an increased cross-sectional area in our tendons, but that was not found to be statistically significant, which is probably in turn why changes at the significant perspective in modulus were not detected. So that made sense to me, I guess, like when I looked at those findings in context of each other.
Yeah, and I guess the difference when you look at like Chris Sentner's, it was 3 months compared to 2. And then also, maybe there is a load component. And I think you touched on that in the paper of maybe you can load it.
I think and I think safety validation studies have to start out like not conservative, but if I had one thing to change about my PhD project, it would have been that I would have actually increased either the speed or the duration of BFR exposure, and I would have pushed it a little bit more. Because I think that on the human side of things, right, you guys are tapping into that 1 rep max percentage and how the patient is doing, and you're kind of progressively loading them. And what I reported is very steady state. And it just had to be from a certain perspective. But if I had one critique of myself and this body of work, it would be that I could have altered the actual exercise protocol, the time of occlusion, the speed at what they were doing, things like that. So that's kind of my own, critique on it. But clinically, I'm using and thinking about BFR in a little different ways as I've evolved and used it more, and just gained experience with the modality. So
I I'm not even that critical of that, Sherry, honestly, because I think what's cool is you found like almost maybe like a low end of where we are seeing some adaptation. And that to me is massively beneficial because it just shows you like, hey, while we know in humans, you walk 15, 20 minutes with BFR over time, you get VO2 max, maybe some hypertrophy, that kind of thing. But here it's like, man, these just walked for 10 minutes. It was 10 minutes. We didn't really discuss the exact protocol. I don't
Yeah, I
think
think
it
that we
was,
should get into protocol because it's
um,
such an easy protocol.
it was 80% pressure. Was it 10 minutes
Yeah, so I
or was
went
it
80%
intervals?
LOP and it was a 10-minute walk protocol. So they did a
Yeah.
3-minute warm up, which was not considered in the 10 minutes. So they walked for 3 minutes just on the land treadmill. And then they walked for 4 minutes and then a 1 minute rest, 3-minute walk, 1 minute rest, and then 3-minute walk. And the longest part of that whole entire thing was the rest periods
The
with the
rest,
inflated.
always.
Um, and when you have horses
Yeah.
on a land treadmill, horses really respond to consistency and they most of the time like a job. And so a lot of these horses would look forward to their daily exercise session. And there's a little bit of anticipation, right? Some would try to trot on the treadmill. Some didn't want to take the rest. They wanted to keep going. So just making them stop and hold it, is the minute up yet? Like, why is it taking forever?
Well, it's funny. I was thinking about this whole thing and I'm going, in a human trial, so much of what you're having to do is just like completely non-existent. You can just tell the human something. But I was thinking, like, in this particular kind of instance, like, I wonder just like how strong of an influence just the handler has, or the veterinarian, or whoever's putting them through it. I would think you would potentially have a pretty strong influence over this. Just the fact that it's Sherry, doing this versus, somebody that doesn't know, as well how to work with these horses or
Well,
have the experience.
there's
So,
definitely a horseman component too, right? Like there's always
yeah.
research that shows you can be literally feet away from a horse and they can sense your heart rate. And I know for a fact on the days where I'm on edge and I walk into the barn and I've got like a stress air about me, right? Like everything just feels a lot more intense, and horses really respond to that energy. And if you're chill, they're usually chill. Some days they choose violence on their own, right? But most of the time, right, they're gonna feed off of your energy. And I have certain handlers that work with me that really do well with certain types of horses over other types of horses, right? And that's a very interesting dynamic, and you have to pair them together, like who's going to facilitate that
Yeah.
workload like the safest and the best way possible for each horse. And there's also nuances to putting a cuff on a horse's leg. And I remember one of the first meetings that I had with Delphi and you guys, and it was a video, and I was putting a cuff on one of my horses. And I had noticed that it's all about like how you put it on, the tightness at first before you put the Velcro on, whether the cuff was tipped or not, where it was out on the leg. And I had done the ORS course, and so I knew ish like how to put it on, my own leg, whatever. But when you're standing in the barn with a very expensive animal in front of you, right, that you really need it to improve clinically and get better, that's when you really hit the road. I almost cussed on your podcast and I didn't.
That's all right. Oh,
That's
I'm going to
fine.
drop an F-bomb before we're
Johnny
done.
does anyway.
Yeah. So, but there's all these different nuances to putting the cuff on correctly. And I watch, people do it. And I think some of my staff, when I'm in the barn, they're like, get out of here, like stop micromanaging us. But there's all these little nuances and little tips and tricks to getting it on quickly, easily, or off quickly and easily.
Yeah.
So I really hope Dr. Alan Page listens to this podcast. He's a researcher at the University of Kentucky, and he and I have been collaborating on a lot of things. And we did a little bit of pilot work with some of their horses looking at mRNA profiles, both regionally, so right below the cuff, and then systemically as well. And working with some of those horses that were more thoroughbred type, got a little Western at some points, but we had a blast working with those study horses too. So that was fun. But yeah, there's working with horses. No 2 days are ever the same. I think the stallions are definitely my favorite. I usually have a handful of horses at each location that I'm like, those are my favorites. Like those are, I like those ones. Similarly, I have my
Those are the cool ones.
favorites. So, but
Mine would be a Shetland pony.
I got to go to Sherry's facility, Johnny. I don't know if I told you that, but I went out to
Of course you did. How was all the cool places?
I made a point to get out there, and she showed my dad and I around, and it was awesome to see just all the different horses. And man, you talk about some beautiful animals. They're incredible.
Yeah.
So,
now you're gonna have to get down to Scottsdale.
Yeah.
Kimberly and see our Scottsdale location. And come on, Johnny, we got to get you.
I will. Yeah, let's do it.
Get you
I got a lot of
come on down.
I told y'all when I was like in elementary, I had to do a stupid barrel race that my local yokel cousins enrolled me in. Me and all the girls. I didn't know it was a girl thing, and so I didn't even finish it. I don't really know how to do these horse things.
Can you imagine this social media post like Johnny Owens putting an equine BFR cuff on a leg? Wouldn't that be so cool?
I think it'd be great.
Johnny Owens getting kicked by a horse and out for the count.
Johnny Owens goes down.
I had a good run. Well, Sherry, I'm doing a lot of performance and recovery talks with the teams nowadays and trainings on how we're using that. Knowing that this is a tendon that really can get injured and you increase stiffness with a pretty straightforward protocol. Could you see from a performance standpoint that maybe this would be something you would do just to maybe bulletproof that tendon a little bit?
I think it fits into the continuum of tendon rehab and preventative strategies, right? Like I think an ORS has been very straightforward about like, this is a modality, you've got to cover your bases on looking at balance and neuromotor control and the other pillars of physical therapy. But the BFR has its place in terms of tendon rehab. And I think we're just still really in the early stages of figuring out how and by what mechanism that happens. But anything you can do to biohack the system and induce physiologic load in a safe way is a win, whether it's working on a horse or working with a human patient. So
the collagen work you're going to be looking at is that off these same horses? So you'll have that data, or are you going to have to do another study?
The data looking at the articular cartilage and the subchondral bone is the same horses.
Okay.
And again, safety perspective stuff, right? So looking at it in healthy cartilage. The thing about it, right, is for decades now, BFR has been used post insert surgery or procedure XYZ, right? ACL recovery, variable knee arthroscopy, Achilles repair. And we've just really blindly prescribed it and thinking that it did not detrimentally affect articular cartilage or the downstream tendon itself, right? Like you put it on a post-op cruciate repair patient, you're looking at it to affect quad function and vastus lateralis function, right? But you don't actually know what it's doing, if anything, to the articular cartilage. That's an important piece, right? And we've not been able to have that piece because of our limited tissue sampling opportunities in human patients, right? So it's not like I'm gonna repair your cruciate, but like I'm gonna need a piece of that medial femoral condyle cartilage just so I can figure out if what we're gonna do. So that was the genesis of this yet next iteration is in these BFR exposed limbs. What was any differences in live dead cell staining and GAG content of the articular cartilage? So I won't spoiler alert that one. But that'll be the third podcast.
Third podcast. You can get
your rabbit's foot is coming. I'm gonna have to go buy a rabbit so I can cut his foot off because I can't find it. I'll go to Gadzooks at the mall or whatever that's called and see if they sell them.
Gadzooks? That's a store?
I don't know. One of those old kitty like stores. That's where I bought mine.
Right next to Claire's.
Right next to Claire's, baby, where you get your ears pierced.
Getting your ears pierced. Yep.
Oh my word.
Any other research down the pike that you want to maybe tease at all? Or are you going to be looking at maybe injured models from a research perspective?
I think for me, like the next things that I have coming down the pipeline is really cool clinical trial stuff. And starting to look more at recovery rates and recovery functions post specific diagnosis. So looking at the horses that I have coming in with super high-end, good, solid workups, well-documented rehab protocols, and return to performance, things like that. I think that's really where we're headed next. I think we've done our thing on the safety validation. I think we've done our thing in terms of cuff development, working with Delphi. There's certain nuances yet that still need to be dialed in, but that's really the next iteration for me, is working in natural injury models. And I think there's a lot of funding sources that are, very interested in performance outcome measures alongside BFR exposure. So I think that's probably where I am headed next as a clinician scientist. But I can't tell you all my secrets on this podcast.
In between your 50 horses, in between the 50 horses you're taking care of, you need to get on it, Sherry.
I know. I'm doing a lot of BFR. It is really fun to tell clients though, because I'm like, hey, I think your horse, if your horse comes for rehab with us, BFR would be something that I'd be reaching for. And when I first started doing this, they were like, what is that BFR? And now every now and then they've heard of it, or they themselves have had it. And they're at least like open to the concept. And so communicating to owners that, rehab for horses, it used to just be rest them in a stall and hand walk them. And that is not at all, where we're at now. Like that does not at all recommend, or that does not represent what we can do, the best things that we can do. So having BFR in my toolbox and being able to tell someone, not only are we the only veterinary center that offers that, but I'm actually the one that developed this cuff. Like that's a really proud moment for me.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
For
Do we have the real proximal cuff yet? It looks like almost like a boomerang that Delphi was working
The
on?
hind limb proximal cuff is still the challenge, Johnny. I have
that's the
a
booger.
total 3 cuffs, 2 of which work super nice, and the one I don't even breathe that it exists because I hate it so much and it's not in a place that I'm proud of. Like so many hours of my
engineers
life.
at Delphi.
Thanks for reading it up though. Like, hey,
yeah, my bad.
Good job, but like that still sucks. So
that thing, I don't know if you ever saw it, Kyle. It looks like a boomerang. It's crazy looking.
I did.
It
was Sherry showed it to me in Colorado. She came out and did a little horse BFR talk, and she had it with her. It was
I had it with, and I still have like, so when Delphi, when we were designing those cuffs together, it was all of it is on paper cutouts, right? And so my house was literally full of paper cutouts and trying to measure it. And my husband was just like, living with a mad scientist, right? Like what? It's like arts and crafts meets.
It's the veterinary version of scrapbooking.
Yeah.
No rabbit feet were harmed in the making of this.
Yeah, that's good. That's good.
So
I have kind of a random question, Sherry, a little bit of a departure from this, but goes to rehab stuff. I was just at so we sponsored a lower limb symposium at Ohio State University this past weekend. And so I was there as kind of our representative. And one of the topics that, kind of comes up a lot, especially these days, is the differences in injury rate, specifically with regard to ACL between men and women. Is there a difference in like male, female horse injuries at all? Are there certain types of injuries that you see female horses get for whatever reason at a higher incidence, or vice versa?
I don't necessarily see differences that I can pinpoint in terms of like mares or female horses only get this injury and geldings or stallions get this injury. But what I will say is that the geldings and stallions end up coming to rehab more commonly because I think the mares just get retired to be brood mares. So I think I end up working with a lot more geldings and stallions because one, the gelding doesn't have an alternate path of use, right? Like it's got to be an athlete or serve some purpose. It can't go raise babies versus the mares and the stallions. But other part of me is like, I mean, our mares just tougher and they don't need the rehab, right? So
Oh, here we go.
I don't know, guys. Maybe.
No, it's true.
Kyle brought it up. He's like, let's talk about men versus women.
It's true.
I can accept it. I can accept it. Men are, I mean, anybody that's worked in rehab knows that women are much more tolerant of pain than men. You know,
Yeah.
Sure.
But I started looking at like our demographics, right? Like what's the average age of a horse that comes to rehab? What are they like? And definitely more geldings and stallions than we have mares. But like I said, I don't know if that's because the mares aren't getting hurt or the people are just like, oh, she's just gonna go, be a brood mare and the genetics are there. So
do they perform similarly in terms of like what they're able to achieve? Like, I mean, we have male and female sports, and generally speaking, men are faster and maybe jump farther. And do you see differences there, or is that pretty well equivocal?
Oh, there's some mares that are just absolute badasses, and they are tough as nails, and they earn every bit as their male counterparts. One of my favorite cutting horses of all time is a mare, and she's so famous. And she was just gritty and didn't give a shit. I mean, she wanted to do her job and whatever it took, and she loved her work. There's a lot of stallion. I'm a stallion person. Like I'm definitely not a mare person. I'm definitely more into the working with the stallions, because I think from some what's the word I'm looking for? It's like related to just general survival, right? Like if a stallion is lame out in the wild, if a stallion can't run fast, it's going to lose its band of mares and it's at risk of being, killed by a predator, right? So they have this like inherent desire, right, to always get better and to be strong and to be fit and to be that whole part. So it's like this very like natural, thing. But no, the mares, and they do equally well. And probably the two most expensive horses that I've ever worked with within my career were both mares. So one, I think they were badasses, but two, their genetics made them just very, very superior. So they not only were themselves a great athlete, but they produced great athletes amongst a variety of sires. So that really establishes them as being like the best of the best. So
I know what it feels like.
It's like working with Serena Williams, right? Like you're just like
chill.
Yeah.
Well, cool, Sherry. Thanks for coming on again.
Yeah,
this is badass.
thanks you guys for
to
having
sum this
me.
back up, man, 10 minutes of walking just over a couple months made that tendon stiffer at 80% limb occlusion.
In a good way, not stiff in a bad way.
Yes, in a good way. And you did the really, really hardcore science here with it. We don't see in a lot of rehab papers of full-on histological and multiple biopsies. So kudos, man. Congratulations on that PhD. I can't wait to see your next work. You might be on this thing like 10 or 20 times by the time we're done.
Well, I have to start talking about
At
like
that point,
co-host. Just gonna be a co-host.
I think I have an idea, Johnny. You guys come to Texas, we record the podcast in the barn, like with the horses, and Johnny puts a cuff on a horse.
Yes.
That I think will get you the highest like views.
That will be YouTube gold, baby.
That's swinging for the fences,
gold.
but like I think we need to make it happen. You're in Texas, Johnny. There's no reason it shouldn't.
Yeah, I'll do it. Only if Kyle wears chaps.
Or Zach.
Zach, assless chaps.
Assless chaps for Zach. Just chaps for Kyle, assless ones for Zach.
Yeah. We'll get the kitty size. All right. Thanks a lot, you guys. Thanks, Sherry.
Thank you so much for having me.
We'll see you soon. Congrats on all your amazing growth and work.
Thanks. I will. Thank you for having me.
Thanks for listening to the Owens Recovery Science Podcast. Owens Recovery Science is a single source for PTs, OTs, ATCs, DCs, MDs, and other medical professionals seeking certification in personalized blood flow restriction rehabilitation training. Find them online at owensrecoveryscience.com.
One last thing before we get out of here. First, want to say a sincere thank you for listening all the way through, but also wanted to remind you that this podcast should not be considered medical advice. It is strictly entertainment. It's a way for us to try to keep up with what is ongoing within the BFR world. If you require some sort of medical attention, medical advice, please seek that from a licensed individual within your state. Thanks, and we'll talk to you soon.